We're back for week 2 of our podcast. Kartik Krishnaiyer along with James Knowles. James, let's start with the Tampa Bay Sun. You were at the match, the 0-0 draw with DC Power, but what a match in terms of defensive stops, goalkeeper saves, and obviously the penalty and stoppage time.
Yeah, I definitely, like many people in the stands, were upset that we did not get a win out of it. But at the same time, the way that the game went, honestly, this team staying undefeated at this point is pretty good. That I will take it. The way that it finished, especially, we're going to get to all of this, I'm sure. But we had hit the crossbar 2 or 3 times. Then DC has hit the crossbar once or twice, and of course the penalty late on. Ashley Orkus seems to be one of the best players in the league at this point, at least in her position. So yeah, it ended a 0-0 draw, but I still gotta say it seemed to be one of the more exciting of those that I've ever seen. Yeah,
and speaking of Ashley Orkus, I have not seen expected goals stats from this league. But I'm assuming Dallas's XG was somewhere over 2 in the last match. Think about all the saves she made, especially in the first half. And then this match, she made, I believe, 7 or 8 saves. So she's conceded once when the XG is probably 3 or 4, at least. So obviously, as you said, one of the best players in the league thus far. Should mention that the Suns still don't have several international players that are awaiting their visas. How do you think that's impacting the way they're playing? Because obviously those are key players. Jade Moore, we mentioned, is one of them. And you're seeing maybe a team that's not very deep and is waiting for those 4 players and then whatever they might pick up in November or December during the break.
Yeah, I think that's definitely partly at play. They haven't been available as far as I'm aware. And with that being said, the players that they have out on the field are the players that they have in training every day, obviously. So these are the ones that should be as familiar with the system as you can be, only roughly, let's say, 2 months into the process. But it is definitely still hampering things, because whether this is a good thing or a bad thing in the end, we shall have to see. But right now, they are relying frequently on academy players. The first game, we had a 16-year-old out there, and I believe in this past game, we actually had different academy players who came on in the second half, including, I forget her first name, I believe it's Sophia Bryan, but her last name is Bryan, number 16 for the Tampa Bay Sun. She came on and stepped in a more defensive midfield role when we needed to play a more defensive game. So, yeah, I know that it is impacting the availability of players, and it is definitely impacting things on the field a little bit beyond that, because of our reliance now on this starting 11 we have been pretty focused on keeping them on the field for, I guess, as long as they can go. Obviously, the team is getting up to full fitness because they only started their training camp in July. Anybody who wasn't on a team practicing every day beforehand probably wasn't at full fitness. And then the youth players are not going to be at professional match level fitness. They might be playing 90 minutes of their own games every week. And that's obviously a certain level that puts them in a place where they can get onto this team. But there's no one who's going to say a U16, U18, U19 level game is going to have anywhere near the same amount of running, anywhere near the same amount of intensity as what we're seeing on the fields at right now at Riverside Stadium.
The crowd, speaking of the stadium, the crowd, there was the natural drop-off that you would have from week 1 to week 2, but let's compare it with Carolina Ascent. Carolina Ascent went from a crowd of over 10,000 to a crowd of maybe 1,000, maybe 1,500. I didn't check the actual attendance number from Sunday, but that's what it looked like on the broadcast. Tampa Bay had a drop-off, and obviously the Rowdies were playing across the bay at the same time. That's where I was, Rowdies versus Miami FC. But the drop-off wasn't that severe. It was actually a very good crowd for a second game. Take us through that.
Yeah, I definitely agree with everything that you said there. The first game, as far as we know, was a sellout. So a sellout, as far as I'm aware, is 5,300 people. And when we have full confirmation on that, obviously that will be published in multiple different places. But if that one was a sellout, this one obviously was not a sellout. But I would still say the vast majority of seats were full. Every single stand looked full. There were just patches here and there where I could see that there were not as many people sitting. In the first half, I was standing where the Tampa Bay Sun were attacking, and there was a patch of open seats behind me in those stands. But when I went to the second half on the other side of the stadium and I was looking out from the supporter section, it still looked pretty good. And I think that the Suns fan base is not just, it definitely will compete with the Tampa Bay Rowdies. There is overlap there for sure. I know people who are involved in both of the supporters groups. So,
and had to pick, and unfortunately had to pick this week, and we're going to have to pick on September 14th also, right? Because there's competing matches. But yeah, continue.
Yeah, that's as you and I were saying before we started recording, we're not exactly sure why that is the way that this has played out. I'm sure that people at USL could have had the foresight to put them on different days.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know if there is some type of competitive part of this where one team or the other is saying, no, I would like it to be on the same night. I really couldn't say. Obviously, the Rowdy schedule was known well beforehand, so we don't know the background.
But the Rowdy schedule was set after we knew the Sun were starting play in August. So but yeah, their actual schedule was set before the Sun's schedule was set. That's true.
Right. Yes. So unfortunately, there will be some people who have to make choices, myself included, when I'm trying to pick which team I can cover live and which team I can go and watch the replay of. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it plays out, and I hope in the future, I guess there would be more coordination. I cover the team, but also I would say that first and foremost, I was a fan, so I would like to say in the future there are fewer of these, but we'll just have to see how it shakes out naturally.
Yep. So that's something we'll continue to monitor as the season goes on. Obviously, the Rowdies are going to make the USL playoffs, which might create more scheduling conflicts, but it might reverse itself next year, May of 2025, when the Rowdies are early in their season and the Sun are presumably in the USL Super League postseason. Before we get out of here, I have to mention major transaction, and I'd like to get some more insight on this, and I've tried to get some insight from Fort Lauderdale United, and nothing yet as we're recording this. Luana Grabias, who is a local player. She played at Nova Southeastern University, which is in Fort Lauderdale, or in Davie, in Broward County, was a star for that team, plays one game for Fort Lauderdale United and is sold to Brooklyn. Now, Brooklyn is putting together their roster really late, James, and they're scrambling. So obviously, maybe there was a premium put on her and a good player and bringing her in, but still really surprising to see Fort Lauderdale sell a local piece. I can see selling a player maybe, but a local player who played college on in the same, not the same exact facility, but in the same college campus that Fort Lauderdale United is playing at now. So that to me is very surprising.
Yeah, I don't know what to make of it exactly, and without having the insight that you are seeking, obviously, then we can't speculate too far. But with Brooklyn, they do have their game coming up this weekend. I believe this will be their first game.
Yep.
And certainly their home opener. So it will just be interesting to see exactly how it all works out for them. I know that a lot of teams have been putting a lot of stuff together kind of on the fly, not because I have any particular insight, but just because the Tampa Bay Sun were the first team to announce this thing and that thing and XYZ along the way. And there were a lot of teams behind them that we didn't hear a lot of those different figures up until maybe a month or two ago at this point. So it did seem like Brooklyn had a couple of names immediately, but it didn't seem like they had filled out their roster. And if this is, I don't know who obviously had the connection to her that they went out and wanted to get her specifically, are already the intra-league transfers that I guess USL has also put a priority on, as opposed to looking at the league the way that, say, MLS would or something like that.
Yeah, really well put, and very interesting to see this transfer after a week of the season. So anyway, we will be back with you next week. The Sun and Fort Lauderdale United are off. We're going to try and get some insight into Jacksonville next week, in addition to talking about these two teams. So once again, thank you for listening.